Welcome. If you're just tuning in, it's the 4th of May 2020, and this is the NWR Virtual Health Conference. We have Cann Group on the line, and Cann Group is building a world-class business focused on breeding, cultivating, and manufacturing and supplying medicinal cannabis for sale and use within Australia and for approved overseas export markets. The company has established research and cultivation facilities in Melbourne and is developing a state-of-the-art cultivation facility near Mildura in Victoria. Peter Crock is on the line, and Peter Crock has nearly 3 decades experience at global agribusiness New Farm, which is listed on the ASX under NWR. Cann Group CEO Peter Crock is helping to shape the future of the medicinal cannabis industry in Australia. With Peter at the helm, he is working closely with an experienced board of directors. Cann Group did receive the first commercial cultivation license in Australia and was the first medicinal cannabis company to successfully list via an IPO on the ASX. In chairing the board of Australia's peak industry body, Medicinal Cannabis Industry Australia, Peter is well versed in the management of regulatory framework in both Australia and abroad. Over to you, Peter.
Terrific. Thanks, Laura, and hello, everyone. Great to be part of this NWR initiative. The presentation I'll walk through with you today has been released on the ASX this morning, and I'd encourage you to download it for your reference. And there you can read through the disclaimer in full detail as you require. From the early registration list, I know a number of you are familiar with Cann already, but I will start with a brief recap for the wider audience today. Cann has remained focused on and is delivering on being a fully integrated medicinal cannabis company. We were the first commercial player to be issued with a license from the Office of Drug Control in February 2017 and have been continuously cultivating under permit since May 2017. Thanks to Zoom and being able to select my own background, I'm actually presenting virtually from SCR8, our secure cultivation room number 8 at our southern facility. I took this photo a couple of weeks ago before the COVID restrictions came in. In the non-virtual world, I'm actually at home, and we've got a renovation next door. I have asked them to back off on the angle grinder and the singing, but I can't vouch for that. So anyway, let's see how we go. Back to the matter at hand. So Premier Daniel Andrews has been a leading advocate for medicinal cannabis from the early days, in the Victorian Law Reform Commission in 2015 kicked off the whole idea of accelerating access for patients, and we've worked closely with the Victorian government, and in the early days our early focus was on delivering biomass to the Victorian program. In parallel to that, we developed an important research capability which allowed us to import genetics through what was a lengthy quarantine process. And at the other end of the spectrum, we've worked through the complex issue of turning biomass into pharmaceutical grade product based on GMP. You'll hear me refer a lot to GMP, or good manufacturing practice, but in the last few months, the first of our products have been released and now delivered to Australian patients, delivering on our promise to be a plant-to-patient company. Plant-to-patient is easy to say, but hard to do. And we are really pleased to see that our early move targeting to be a major supplier into the medicinal cannabis market at various points in the supply chain sees us now fielding interest from others who are specialising in certain areas and are looking for a source of medicinal cannabis. From a global perspective, it's important to point out that we see this opportunity relating to pharmaceutical grade GMP medicinal cannabis products. Prohibition Partners are one of the main research players looking at the cannabis market, and as legislation continues to be put in place around the world, they are forecasting all regions to become multi-billion medicinal cannabis markets by the middle of this decade. We're seeing market growth proceed rapidly and ahead of any local production capability. Germany is a market everyone is looking at or talking about, but of course Australia fits into that category as well, with the bulk of patients here being treated with imported product, even though some of that product has not necessarily met TGA GMP requirements. There's no doubt the North American situation has created a lot of noise in the last 9 months, but it must be recognised that the recreational sector, following full legislation in Canada, and that their medical market over there is based on a lower standard product that is non-GMP, it's meant they've been caught where they've not been able to shift excess production into other markets. With the Australian legislation structured to ensure that only GMP grade product is produced here and only that can be exported, the industry here is well positioned to service new markets that are now introducing medicinal cannabis legislation, such as New Zealand, France and Poland. Turning our attention to what's happening here in Australia, it's really encouraging to see how the path to patient continues to be streamlined. Our focus remains closely fixed on accelerating access to Australian patients. In fact, it is a requirement that Australian demand is serviced ahead of any export production. The government initiative to classify medicinal cannabis as an unregistered product but allow its supply to patients under the Special Access Scheme has been an excellent way to get the ball rolling. As the evidence base builds as well, it's expected there will be a huge potential growth in patient numbers over the next 5 to 10 years here in Australia. It's also really encouraging to see the support being provided to expand the evidence base for medicinal cannabis. While fully registered products may be some way off, now that we have products coming through the GMP development pathway and are able to supply doctors with what they're looking for, that is pharmaceutical grade products that look like medicines they normally prescribe, we are really well positioned to meet this demand. In terms of Cann's commercial activity, we've put in place key building blocks for growth. With medicinal cannabis being an unregistered product in Australia and additional requirements handling a Schedule 8 product under the Special Access Scheme, the Symbion Agreement was one of the first and most important pieces to have in place to ensure we could deliver products efficiently. Recently, we were pleased to announce that the first products we have made available that have been made available under early stage stability testing program results were released and have now made their way to our first Australian customer, Intura. The SAS approval for that product has subsequently been released and first products gone to patients here in Australia. The PureCann supply agreement that we announced recently coincided with New Zealand's medicinal cannabis legislation coming into effect on the 1st of April this year. It was just on a year ago that we made the decision to look at what was happening in the region, and it was clear to us that PureCann would be a key market in the new market over there, a key player in the new market over there. We look forward to working with PureCann and to help improve access for patients over the Tasman. While all Canadian companies have domestic issues on their hands at the moment, we are remaining in close contact with Aurora. We believe our ability to feed TGA GMP quality grade material into their network across 25 countries will be significant. As I mentioned earlier, the Australian legislation requires that Australian supply that we meet Australian supply as a priority. The agreement with Aurora reflects that, and while they do have first rights to cultivation capacity for product destined for export markets, we've got a long lead time planning process in place that will allow us to deal with those contractual requirements. Looking at where Cann is operating in the medicinal cannabis space, we can step through what we've achieved and put in place from plant to patient. It's important to note that in each of these steps, there are specific regulatory requirements that we've had to work through. Right from genetics, where we've established strains here that we've brought in internationally, but also worked with Agriculture Victoria. We've got a strong base ready for supply now, which we're doing already for patient supply, but also importantly for future genomics research. One thing we have done is that we've looked at supplementing our local cultivation with biomass from Aurora, and we're working on that at the moment. We've got manufacturing arrangements in place and have worked through that process, and I'll talk more of that shortly. And we've delivered on product both domestically and internationally. This has been a learning process for us and for the regulators, but we've shown that we can and are ready to deliver on this supply chain from end to end. In terms of our proven cultivation capacity, we've been continuously cultivating at our existing Melbourne facilities since May 2017 under both a medicinal cannabis license, but also permits and also research permits. Our southern facility has been operating mostly under the medicinal cannabis permits for clinical application and for commercial production, while our northern facility has been focused on handling international genetics and, amongst other things, preparing for our accelerated breeding program work with Agriculture Victoria. We've also been a key enabler for research programs established by the ARC-funded Medicinal Agricultural Research Hub at La Trobe University, and also with New South Wales DPI's Cooperative Research Centre project. While the capacity in these facilities is limited relative to what we're moving to, the pilot scale work has been critical to confirm our processes. As I mentioned before, what we have started to do, though, is also supplement this capacity with biomass from Aurora. In relation to our operations at Cann, particularly in cultivation and production, we've taken steps early in response to COVID-19. Slipping my hat on as chair of the MCIA, the Industry Association confirmed both at federal and state government levels that medicinal cannabis operations are recognised as providing an essential service. While this means that our staff, as required, can attend our cultivation facilities and are exempt from some social distancing measures, we've implemented a shift system and split our cultivators into two teams with no overlap to reduce the potential impact of COVID should it surface at Cann. The bulk of our non-operations team have been able to work effectively from home, and the teams working on our Mildura project have been able to focus on GMP design and planning documentation, preparing for remobilisation on site. Drilling into the GMP topic in more detail, we teamed up early on with IDT to ensure we had alignment across the key regulators, being the Office of Drug Control and the TGA, to be ready to operate in this space. There's no cutting corners. There's no cutting corners on either front, and we believe the time and investment we've collectively put into establishing the capability we are now operating to and meeting some of the highest quality standards are not only required here to supply Australian patients, but will also be key to growing export markets. At the AGM late last year, we announced a pause and a reset to our plans for the Mildura expansion project. Since then, we've reduced our current operating costs to the tune of some $7 million on an annualised basis. And we've focused on completing the design and remobilisation plan for the project so that we're ready to press go. The rescoped startup capacity at Mildura, which we are referring to as Stage 1A, is expected to produce 12,500 kilograms annually. That's measured as dry flower. We see this as a viable starting point and will be readily expandable with minimal risk to the ongoing business in due course. We will be monitoring market conditions closely with regard to kicking off future expansion. So, and as I've mentioned before, we've also taken the step to de-risk our scale-up in Mildura by supplementing current cultivation with imported biomass via our partner Aurora for processing at IDT. Appropriate permits have been applied for and first shipment is now being coordinated. One thing I've always said that agriculture at scale is something to behold. And as you can see, we're well advanced in Mildura, having completed the overall glasshouse structure before we paused on the fit out. In using the term Sky Class facility, we're referring to Aurora's purpose-built facility in Edmonton known as Aurora Sky. The footprints of the rooms in Mildura and in Edmonton are exactly the same. They just happen to have twice as many rooms in their facility as ours. But the important part of this is that we've been able to integrate the learnings from their operations into our new Mildura design. Another quote you might have heard from me before is that in agriculture, scale is everything. While resetting a project like this to complete in stages is not as simple as just dividing the footprint into three, what we've been able to do is modify the execution plan to deliver functionality that allows cultivation at scale efficiently and effectively on a staged basis. Let me just click here and I'll show you some footage of the facility via some drones that we took recently. So just looking at the facility here, what we are really looking forward to is remobilising on site, and in doing so, when we start commissioning the operation, it's clear we're going to become a significant employer in the Mildura region. With respect to the modelling and funding options for Mildura, during the reset and design period, we've taken the opportunity to investigate a number of funding options, and these are being presented to and assessed by the board in the coming month for us to select a path forward in this financial year. In this slide, we reconfirm some of the key metrics we've talked about before. Stage 1A cost to completion has been cross-checked and sits between 65 to 75 million. Stage 1B is an independent decision point, and we anticipate that when we kick that off, it'll require a further 30 million to complete that stage. In relation to the scale-up volume achievable in the part year of year 21, one thing we've done here is to model the impact of using imported biomass to supplement Mildura production. We believe it's important to de-risk possible delays in startup that may come through COVID-19. The cost of goods sold ranges you see here reflect total manufacturing cost to take a product through to GMP release, and it's based on a basket of goods including GMP packed flour through to extracted and formulated oil formulated finished dose form oils and the like. The cost of goods also vary according to the proportion of locally cultivated versus imported biomass. The sale price also reflects a mix of domestic and export products in various forms, but all to a GMP standard. As I mentioned earlier, our team has used the COVID working from home period to refine our design, prepared detailed documentation to support GMP license requirements, and plan for remobilisation of construction crews on site. At Cann, we talk about coming to work to make a difference in people's lives. Providing access to medicinal cannabis for patients is a primary driver. We know our product is in demand and that market demand is growing in Australia and in over 30 markets around the world that have put legislation in place for medicinal cannabis. This is also being buoyed by clinical trials that are being initiated around the world. We are also confident that Australia's requirement to manufacture pharmaceutical grade products will be of benefit not only to patients here and prescribing doctors, but will also be sought after in key export markets. Cann is a fully vertically integrated operation. We have a proven capability from plant to patient. We've been leading the way in learning with the regulator, but at no stage have we cut any corners. In a previous life, a European colleague of mine said that there's an old Austrian saying, reputation arrives by foot but leaves on horseback. We know it is vital that we do not deviate from the high standards that we've been working to and strive for. The experience we've gained from our existing cultivation facilities has been ideal in preparing us to scale up at Mildura. But we've identified that we can reduce the scale-up risk by partnering with and utilising Aurora biomass in the short term. But as we scale up Mildura, we will have a platform that will support Cann as a leading player in Australia's medicinal cannabis industry. Thank you, and back to you, Laura, for any questions.
Thanks so much, Peter. That was a great overview of everything going on with Cann Group. We have a couple of questions. Craig has asked a couple of questions on the line while you've been speaking. Craig wants to know how physically secure are your growing facilities to any potential criminal attention?
Yeah, that's a major focus of the Office of Drug Control. They, from day one, have been concerned about risk of diversion. So the requirements that we put in place, including multiple layers between the outside world and cannabis, as you see behind me, yeah, we've got security systems in place, and we don't talk about the detail of them because that obviously would compromise the security. But there are, yeah, we have serious security in place.
Mm-hmm. And also, he wants to know, what is the targeted profit margins on your products? So this, I don't know if this is hard to answer. It might be commercially sensitive, but
it is, and it depends. But we're operating in a number of points throughout the supply chain. So we're focused on delivering and developing differentiated products that are seen as true medicines, so pharmaceutical grade GMP medicines. But we will also be operating in areas supplying API, so active pharmaceutical intermediate, and various forms right through to dry flower packed as GMP. So those obviously attract different margins, but the whole idea of moving to value-added products is a key component to us protecting and having valuable margins in place as well.
On those different products in the market, how does the recent announcement about CBD potentially becoming available over the counter impact players like Cann Group?
Yeah, from, again, slipping my hat on as chairman of the MCIA Industry Association, we will be engaging with and talking to the regulators about the plans with CBD. The TGA have already made it clear that any medical claims will mean that product needs to remain as a through the TGA as a medicine. So down scheduling of CBD to be available over the counter, that won't apply for anything that's being used medically. So it's going to differentiate between the two, and as an industry association, we'll also make sure that that's well understood in terms of how the industry operates.
Mm-hmm. Peter, you showed us an excellent footage of the drone going over the Mildura production facility. And as you did mention, agriculture scale is something to behold. And it was certainly confirmed by that footage. And you say you're well advanced with the production, with the Mildura facility. But what would be the best case scenario for the finalisation of that facility? Is it likely to be, end of next year, end of next calendar year, or end of next financial year? What are we looking at?
We're ready to restart. So as soon as we finalise the funding position, and also work through what the impact of COVID is with being able to re-engage on site with work crews, we actually think we'll be able to execute quicker with the completion of the project and the fit out. So As you saw, we've already got the superstructure in place, and it's now focused on the technical fit out within the facility. But having been able to plan that in a staged completion, and therefore stage 1A is going to be smaller than what we'd originally planned with the full construction, we think we'll be able to move quickly on that. So yeah, we'll be looking into next year obviously now, but trying to execute on that as quickly as we can.
Peter, you've had a lot to do with the industry association over the years, so you're very well positioned to comment on the progress of the industry over that time. How far do you think the Australian sector has come over the last, say, 2 to 3 years? I know that you listed on the ASX only, 3 years ago now, and there's been a lot of progress and development since then.
Yeah, there has, and there's no doubt that the industry is maturing, and even the industry association, we've seen clearly. We had the Cannabis conference at the start of this year, and I think it was a really important showcase to show that it's a real industry and real players. So it was terrific to see the support that we had over 240 registrants for that, and we got it away just in time before the COVID lockdown. So we were able to showcase where the industry had got to, and the regulator was there. We had all sectors of the industry came and took part in the conference, and it's terrific to see how far it's come. And we expect to see that grow, particularly as we can work with the medicos and clinical data coming into play to support the use of medicinal cannabis. We'll see it grow considerably.
Well, thank you so much for presenting today, Peter. We look forward to following along with your news flow with Cann Group.
Terrific. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks.
Next up today, we do have Oventus Medical. They'll be up in about 5 minutes' time. Oventus is a Brisbane-based medical device company, and they're commercialising a unique treatment platform for sleep apnea and snoring. Stay tuned, as always. We'll be back in about 5 minutes with Oventus. Thank you.